Welcome to this AP US History video. Today we're going to talk about the Great Awakening. So what the heck is the Great Awakening? So there are actually 4 of these in American history. We're kind of living in one of them right now. And the reason why is this: America has always been a deeply religious country. Whether it was the Puritans and the Quakers up in the north, or if it was the Chesapeake with the Anglican Church, America has a lot of deep-seated religious values and institutions. That's changing a little bit these days. A lot of younger generations are kind of dismissing religion because they're seeing it as corrupt. But religion has always been a part of our history. And when you go back to the 1700s, the Puritans who had gotten started, well, they seem to be going through what we're going through today. They seem to be losing a lot of people. How do we know this? Well, after the Salem witch trials, the Puritans passed a rule called the Halfway Covenant. The Halfway Covenant said, hey, look, if you join up with us, you'll be halfway saved, and we're going to help you get the rest of the way. Now, just think about that for a moment. The Puritans believed that only God was able to save people. So what are they talking about? That people could be halfway saved? That doesn't make any sense. By the time we got to the beginning of the 1700s, a new movement had arisen, and that was known as the rationality movement. We'll talk about it in a second. And that violated the Puritans' beliefs, but the Puritans are going to strike back. Okay, in the 1700s, back in Europe, there was a huge movement called the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is a huge movement with diverse people in it, but the biggest ones I want to talk about are rationality and empiricism. The idea behind the Enlightenment was that we could use our minds and our senses in order to get to the truth, either by using our minds, rationality, or by observing things scientifically, empiricism, or looking at empirical truth. I'll give you an example really quick. There was a man named Rene Descartes, and Rene Descartes asked, how do we know that we even exist? He said, basically, in the end, I know that I exist because I can ask the question. I can use my mind. And then he said, let's use our mind in order to doubt everything that we've been given, and off of that doubt, come to new answers. Now, that might sound pretty cool to you, but it definitely didn't sound really good to people who are coming of a Puritan background. Why? Because if we're using our mind, and that's what's most important, that means we're replacing God. Okay, so now we've set the context for the Great Awakening. In the 1700s, there were 2 groups of people, the Old Lights and the New Lights. Now, these were not names that these people would have called themselves. The Old Lights were called that way because of the people who are going to be in the Great Awakening. Who are the Old Lights? They're religious ministers, people who taught at religious universities like Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. But they used rationality to come to their conclusions. A group of new ministers who called themselves the New Lights, people like Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield, made the argument that these guys were corrupt. These old lights used rationality when they should be turning to faith in God. In their belief, every human being was absolutely corrupt and needed redemption. Their big argument was bow down, fall down on your knees, and beg God for his mercy. Now, these weren't the Puritans, but sure sounds a lot like the Puritans, right? Corruption of human beings, the desire for redemption. Only God chooses. In the end, George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards made an argument. Their argument was, let's return back to our old faith. The old faith that stressed that you can't use your mind to get to God. You have to use your fear and your desire for redemption. Okay, so why does any of this matter? Why should we care, especially for the upcoming American Revolution? Remember those old lights? The Old Lights were the guys who taught at universities. They were a part of the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church is the national church of England, right? So who do they represent? They represent the king. Along come these New Lights who say those guys are corrupt. Those guys are teaching us from a way that doesn't fit with our actual true faith. We're the New Lights. We've got the right way to do it. And these guys, George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards, they went out into areas of New York and the farmlands and had huge followings of people. In fact, one of the people who came out to visit them once was Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin didn't believe in institutionalized religion, but he said when he heard the speech given by George Whitefield, he emptied out all his pockets and gave his money to the man for his religious mission. The point being, George Whitefield, Jonathan Edwards used emotion. They used passion to get people to redeem themselves for God. And in the process, they criticized these established leaders of the Anglican Church, which represented the King of England. I think you know where I'm going with this. Anyways, that's going to be our big question. How did the Great Awakening establish the political roots for a possible American Revolution? Okay, see you in class.